Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Pop and Prose podcast. My name is Gott, and today my guest is, my favorite person in the universe, my wife, Lisa. Lisa M. Gott, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you said it was me and that I didn't have to look over my shoulder and be like, uh-oh, uh-oh.
Now I got to figure out what to say to the person I'm going to have on the next show, because I told her she was my favorite person in the universe. It's you. It's been you for 12 years, and it will be for eternity.
Yay!
And I can say that any day of the week, but today also happens to be Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you, and to those of you listening, it won't be Valentine's Day when you're listening to this, unless you listen to it a year from now, because I'll be posting this, in a couple days.
Yeah.
But, I'm going to talk about what we're going to be talking about today. Lisa's been on the show in the past, and we've talked about TV shows we've watched, movies we've watched. I think we've talked about books before. And the name of this show is Pop and Prose, and we're going to talk about
writing.
Writing, which definitely falls into the prose category.
Or creativity at large.
Creativity, because you can't have writing, especially fiction writing, without creativity. Mm-hmm. Well, for nonfiction as well.
Yeah.
But one thing that we have discovered over the years, and I would think that any other writers or just artists in general, humans discover, it doesn't even have to be exclusively to artists, is that changes come our way when we least expect them. I'm not saying that that necessarily means bad changes, but
and sometimes the changes can be either internal or external.
Yes, exactly. Whether it's external or internal, things can come along and maybe take us away from the path that we are on. And, sometimes, unfortunately, that can be, a detrimental thing. But other times it can lead us to good places that we weren't even imagining going to. I think we can both attest to that happening to us multiple times in our lives.
That's why we're together.
It is, yeah. And that's the thing. I that's very true for us. And I would say that that's true for a great many people out there, probably the majority of people. Most of us have been through some sort of breakup at some point. Mm-hmm. Whether, I know there are some people who have been with the same person they've been with since they were a teenager, and that's very few and far between. But most of us have experienced heartache, and maybe, when we first fell in love with someone, we thought, this is my forever person, and you get all kinds of dreams in your head, you get plans in your head, and then it doesn't work out, and you have to make changes, and you move forward, and then you end up in a place that you are happier than you ever thought you were going to be with that other person. Mm-hmm. I know I can certainly say that from relationships I was in 20 plus years ago, where I thought, my world was going to end because I didn't get what I wanted or who I wanted, and now I look back and I'm like, oh, thank goodness.
Well, and I think sometimes it's, we just talked about this before we started the show. It takes courage.
Yes.
To kind of, what are all the poetic things, trees bend so they don't break, and sort of human beings have to learn how to bend and break before they break. And I think part of that bending is courage.
Yes.
You have to have courage to lean into the winds of whatever season of your life is circling around you.
Exactly. And sometimes that courage may be harder to reach than at other times.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get hit really hard by things, regardless of what they are, whether it's something related to our careers, our love lives, our dreams. Sometimes when you don't get those things, it hurts bad, and it takes you a while to grab a hold of that courage and move forward. But as we've talked about before, moving forward is so very important for all of us, every day. And what we're going to do here is, like we said at the beginning, is kind of tie this into creativity. We are both writers, but I think this can apply to any artist. And let's talk about it with writing, since we, like I said, we both are writers. Lisa, how have these things maybe affected you? I know the answer to some of this, but let's talk.
Let's pretend
for
the benefit of the listener.
Yes,
the whole inspiration really behind this is some pretty gigantic pivots I've made recently, and I made kind of a joke about it when I started my Substack again, and basically said, and today you even said it would be a great name of a book, but this year is kind of like, the year of questionable decisions. And I think,
yes.
I kind of talked about, and I think that's the courage. That's where the courage part comes into, because we're afraid sometimes to make the right decision, because the right decision for us individually may not be what the popular opinion is.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing we all have to remember, whether we're a creative person or just a human being living, is that only we individually, the artist, the person, know what's right for us. I mean, even when writing and working with an editor, of course it's always great to get other people's outside opinion of your work, right? Ultimately, you are the owner of that work. Yeah. And you have the ultimate authority, unless you're under some contract with a traditional publisher. I'm sure there are, specifics with that, but you are ultimately the creator and owner of your product, and you know what is true for your story, and you have to fight for that. And I've heard even traditionally published, authors will say, I had to push back. Yeah. And say, I hear you where you're at, but this is where I believe this is true. And I know even in my schooling, in my undergraduate with English and creative writing, and also all the way into the MFA, thankfully I had teachers who were reminding us, maybe especially the writers and students who didn't have the confidence to have that courage, that to say, this is the right decision for me. And so kind of leading into that, it was so strange that I even went back into the MFA program. Originally, I was going to do a graduate degree in business because I work in corporate settings and law firms. But I had had this new confidence with writing again. And I was like, gosh, I just want to study more writing. I was never the person who wrote my whole life and read books about writing. So it was kind of a gift to myself to lean. So I had courage to, in that instance, lean away from a more popular opinion, which is get the business degree because it'll give you more opportunities, and go learn something that might not yield anything for you except for knowledge, and knowledge is power. I've always agreed with that.
Absolutely.
So I went into it. I did great. I was one class shy of graduating with my MFA with all A's.
Yeah.
A 4.0.
You really did fantastically.
I was nearing the end of my novel. I had everything planned out. I knew I could finish it. But I was absolutely burned out. I was burned out on a lot of different things. I was burned out by the process. I learned a lot. I want to preface this by saying I'm not poo-pooing where I went to get school or anyone who taught me, because I grew as a writer. I absolutely grew as a writer. But I knew that last class was going to take a lot of different kind of work. And at my age, I'm in my mid-40s, everything is scales for me. What is when I look at a decision, I want something that's going to give me more than what it's going to take away from me. And I felt like with one class to go, I had gotten all the good knowledge that I needed out of that. But by taking that last class, while trying to juggle everything else in my life, I was going to have to rush the process that wasn't going to be authentic. And something didn't feel right. And if I have learned anything in life, it's the courage to listen to my gut.
Yes.
My gut told me to walk away from bad relationships. My gut told me for some reason to say yes, I was a writer to someone at a book signing when I literally hadn't written anything since I was a child in poetry. That gut instinct that told me, yeah, go ahead, just sit down and write a novel. That said, yes, I'm going to move to Delaware and marry this guy that I just met 6 months ago. That was all courage to listen to my gut instinct, because I knew that each one of those individual decisions were true for me in that moment. They met me. I met myself with what I needed and wanted in that moment. And so when I came to that class, I remember saying to you, I had been contemplating it inside my head. I hadn't even talked about it with you yet. And I kept arguing with myself about it. Like, make sure you're making a right decision. You're not letting exhaustion. You're not letting whatever, because I knew myself, and I knew that if I walked away, I wanted to make sure I didn't regret that.
Yes.
Because I either wanted to push through it and do it, but I was like, what am I going to get from it? A piece of paper? The piece of paper never meant anything for me. The piece of paper, I have a career. So for me, it was learning and growing. And so that was my first, at least recent, courage of leaning into my gut and making that questionable life decision of saying, I think I'm good. I appreciate everything everyone has done for me in this program, but I'm good. Yeah. And I'm ready to kind of walk away with what I have for this. And I realized this, and I had weeks to finalize this decision. And I was like, okay, sit on it. Keep asking yourself, keep questioning yourself to make sure that this is the right thing. And every day that went by, I felt lighter. I felt giddier. I felt freer. I felt relieved. I was like, that is my gut saying you're making the right decision.
Yeah, that made me so happy to see. And obviously, well, we had many talks about it as it was all going on, and like you just said, I had questions at first. I'm like, will she be happy with this? Yeah. After spending this time in school, will there be regret later on? But the more we talked about it, and the more that you showed how you knew this was the right decision for you, I saw how happy that made you. That made me happy, and like you, I knew it was the right way to go. And we talked about courage a few minutes ago, and it's not always the easiest thing to embrace, but like what you did was very courageous, because you did what you felt was right, where other people may have felt much differently. For some people in school, their main goal might have been getting that piece of paper, and it would have devastated them, and they would have felt like maybe they had failed if they said if they didn't get that piece of paper. But you knew what you want, and you knew what you personally needed, and in those kind of situations, it doesn't really matter what anyone else wants or what they personally need. It's always it's your own journey, and I think that's wonderful. I mean, that's a big deal, making a decision like that.
I mean, it was amazing, because I felt like someone had taken like 900 pounds off my shoulders. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, I can actually sit down and watch a TV show without feeling guilty. I can read a book and devour it and not have all of these assignments, and I don't have to worry about writing my book while trying to edit it at the same time. And I had every intention that I would continue to write this book and continue to write books. Yeah. And then came another wind that brought with it another gut instinct, because as the weeks and the days went on since my life kind of opened up, because I made sure I worked ahead. I got the homework all done weeks before the class was over, so my break kind of began before even school was over. And I thought, well, I certainly am not going to just instantly go back and dive back into my book. I need kind of a break.
I might take a little week or so or whatever.
Yeah. And I was like, I need to step away from it anyways and kind of come back to it just from a personal standpoint, and not from what is my professor going to be happy about with a change that I potentially make. But then the strangest thing happened was I started to crave writing in a different way. And that's where the Substack blog came in. And I used to, my foray into all of this and how we met was short stories, poetry, fiction, blog posts, talking like this with other writers. And I all of a sudden had a hunger to just talk about some of these things, which is where, the Substack blog came into play. And I was hungry for that, but I still didn't feel like writing. And I kept reading, and I'd read another book, and I'd watch another show, and I'd make a recipe, and I'd just enjoy life for a little bit. And as the days went on, I was like, I actually don't know if I want to do this. Because all of a sudden I started back with the scales again. Except this time I was saying, does going back to finishing this novel and doing everything in whatever way, whether I decide to self-publish or try to query it, is that whole experience going to give me more than it's taking away, or the opposite? And when I started doing that, even this morning when we were talking, I was like, it's taking more away from me. Yeah. And part of that is I have written a book. like I said just a couple minutes ago, I was never a person that aspired to be a writer. And I had this breakthrough moment this morning where I said, I never understood why I said to that woman at the book signing that I was a writer. And then that shoved me into this journey of like learning how to write and writing short stories.
Many short stories.
Writing my book and publishing it all on my own, right when self-publishing was right there. And my whole book was about healing and hope and second chances at love. And a lot of it seemed somewhat autobiographical because I was coming out of one of the darkest periods of my life and I wanted to have hope. And so that book was kind of a gift to myself and to anyone else who struggled to say, one, you're not alone. There are other people on the floor crying. You are not alone. And also to the people on that floor saying, I don't know if I want tomorrow. There's a sun that's going to come. And there's people who might love you, and there's always going to be a reason to keep getting up for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's true.
And I gave this character, she had a wildly different story than I did, of course, but she felt the same things, but her ending was my hope for myself. And I realized this morning, I was like, oh my God, the whole purpose of me ever getting into that and writing that book was I manifested you. And it kind of goes to, I had courage to do that. Now, I'm going to be honest. I love writing stories. I think the book that I'm writing is fantastic. I think it's a great story.
I think it is.
I have many other things, but I also know how difficult writing a book is. It's not writing the book and coming up with the story ideas is the fun part. Editing it, revising it, and then publishing it is the heinous part. And I'll be honest, I've been somewhat deflated. The self-publishing market is absolutely saturated. So you've got to have gusto to really go 157,000% with marketing. You're going to have to spend money to make money in that industry. You're going to have to be prepared for potentially years and years and years of rejection if you attempt to go the traditional route. Because traditional publishing now is even more hard than it was before self-publishing came. Because they're taking losses and hits. So they're looking for people who already have a name and are known. And I thought, God, do I really want all of this?
Yeah.
Like, do I really want it? And I realized that I might be okay with letting that go.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, that seems really bad. I just went and I spent all this time and money on stuff to learn. And I'm like, but the learning is there. I read books and I understand and interpret them and critique them in ways that I never would have hoped, which has actually deepened my enjoyment of the process of something I loved from as far back as I remember.
And something like that's priceless, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I realized, I was like, oh my God, I don't want a website anymore. I just want my Substack. I want to write blogs. I want to read. I want to get back into short fiction. That's easier. Maybe it's more difficult for some people to write, but short fiction is easier for me. It doesn't take as much time. Even if you have to flesh some things out and it takes a while, you're talking about like maybe a week. And look, I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winning writer or a poet laureate, over here.
Right.
I just want to write stuff that makes me happy. And if there's one person who reads it on some platform somewhere, like I talked about maybe potentially joining Vocal again.
Yeah.
Because I liked the inspiration behind the writing challenges and all that. And I placed in a couple of them before when I was on there. And I was, all of a sudden, the same things started to happen. As I felt lighter. I was like, God, I feel like I could just fly away. I'm so happy. I'm so relieved. The pressure is off of me. And I realized that in this moment, I needed to take courage to make yet another questionable life decision, which is I'm going to set the pen of the novel aside and just keep it small and keep it close to my vest and just more of like a open journal to myself and to other people. And, I don't know. I feel great about it.
I know you do, and that makes me so happy. And, it's, like I said, there's a lot of courage there, and that's not easy. Like, for myself, sometimes that hasn't been easy, where I have been, for those who don't know, I although I write, and that's how we met because we both had an interest in writing, I am unpublished. I've posted some short stories over the years online, but I do not have any novels out there. I have started writing many novels over the years. Some have gotten much, much further than others, like close to completion, but for one reason or another, I did not publish them or seek to publish them. Some of that, I think I may have talked about in other shows. It goes because of different reasons than we've talked about so far. Some of that is because of some of my own insecurities. Some of it deals with my having ADHD, lack of confidence. And thankfully, I've found ways to combat those things over the years, and I've gotten stronger as a writer, and I believed in myself more, and I'm very, very happy about that. But you still have to be willing to change where you're going if you find that something's maybe not what you originally wanted it to be. For example, last year I spent the better part of 2025 working on a novel. I got an idea for a story. It was actually sort of based on a TV show that I liked when I was a kid that dealt with invisibility. It was my own, I don't know, let's just say it was inspired by that. It was a TV show called The Invisible Man, short-lived show. It was on NBC. I want to say it was 1975, 1976. I was real little. I was 10 years old. But it was sort of my own take on something like that, but modernizing it, making it more comical. And I spent a lot of time on it. I did a lot of outlining for it. I wrote several chapters for it. I had like playlists. I like to listen to music when I write. I had playlists made for it. I had very specific rules for those playlists. I really kind of, to some people, you could say, probably would think I went overboard with it a little bit, because I told, I'll just share it, for those playlists, because this was based on something that I fell in love with back then. I made the playlists all from back then. It was actually, they were going to cover from when I was 10 years old until the time that I graduated high school. So we're talking like, pretty long period there, 8 years. But I had lists made of all these things I was going to be listening to. I was only going to listen to stuff from that era, nothing else, while I wrote, because I kind of wanted to be in the mindset of the kid who fell in love with writing, the kid who fell in love with these kinds of stories. And it was working for me for a while. But then I was finding that I just wasn't liking this story, and I could have continued on with it. I knew where it was going. I knew how it was going to end. Excuse me. But I just wasn't loving it, and I was feeling I was doing it just for the sake of doing it. And I know all writers, all creative people get doubts as they're doing things, and they might want to stop and move on to something else. But it was more than that. It was just a matter of, I just flat out didn't want to do this story anymore. Why don't you talk for a minute, because I need some water.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that makes it hard when you have the courage to make decisions is, one, kind of like me going back to the MFA decision, is I needed to assess the real reason behind what I was doing it. Was I doing it just because I was exhausted, because suck it up and just get it over with if that's the reason? And I was going to do that if that was the reason why I wanted to pull out. But it was more than that. It was deeper than that. And I think sometimes you never, when you first set out, it's wonderful to think that we are all clairvoyant and we know exactly what we want out of life. And I think maybe there's a little bit of a human flaw with that. And that's where the pressure comes, not just from society, but also from ourselves. Is that, we set out with this thing, I'm going to go do this. And sometimes it can be actually detrimental to us if we keep going and working towards something that especially as we continue to evolve doesn't fit us anymore.
Yes, exactly.
And so the real question is, you have to ask, well, why am I deviating? Am I, like to your story's point, am I leaving this story because I'm having a classic writer problem of the dangly, shiny, bright new story idea is much more
this
fun?
This story's starting to get hard, so do I want to move on to something
exactly.
else? You know?
Is it my lack of focus towards this, or is it legitimately the story isn't suited for me? And I think there's so much of that, and I think that's part of the courage of making the decision. Is you also have to have the courage to understand that when you make that decision, you are making it under the best possible situation you can, and you may not be right.
Right.
You may come back, 8 months from then and say, well, actually, you know what? I think I was kind of wrong with that.
Exactly.
And that goes to one of my other great favorite sayings of this era of my life, which is you got to give yourself grace to make the mistakes, to stumble, but also listen to yourself, get to know yourself, meditate on things, try to not make, snap judgments, but also, understand that sometimes our goals, it's okay to redefine where you're headed.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't born with a map of a journey of where you are going.
Right.
You are actually kind of drawing it as you go along.
Yeah.
You have an idea of the glorious land that you're headed towards, but really there could be new fun corners of that map that you didn't even know exist that become your new destination.
Yes, exactly.
When you arrive there, and that takes the courage to say, you know what, I'm good right here. I'm going to turn and I'm going to pivot. And right here in this moment, I'm going to meet myself with the desires that this current version of me needs.
I love that. And I like what you said a couple minutes ago about, like in getting back to writing, where a writer might ask himself, is the story just not right for me?
Yeah.
And for me, I figured that, yes, I could have kept going with it. I could have finished it. But the story, I think, may have been right for an older version of me.
Yes.
Because I got these ideas. I was embracing something from decades ago. And maybe if I had written it when I was in my teens or 20s, that would have been different and would have given me a different kind of fulfillment. But today me is someplace else. Yeah. And that's what I accepted, and that's why I've, decided to move in different directions with things.
And I think there's something really important about that in life. I mean, I know you and I have talked about it a lot because you are the more classical writer in that you have spent most of your life from childhood on wanting to be a writer in some way or another. Who literally did the whole pen to paper, I scribbled stories. I never felt like I fell into that fray because I was never that person. I mean, I scribbled a little bit. I wrote some poetry when I was a kid, but mostly because I was an introverted only child where there was some trauma happening around me, and poetry and the page and the poetry that I was reading in books were so filled with big emotions, and I was like, ooh, that's where I can put mine. These people seemed to store their big emotions and their dark shadows on the page. Yeah. Maybe I can do that for me, and it helped. Just like music was playing music, and piano was a way for me to close my eyes and just feel it out and let the music take some of the guck and muck inside of little me that didn't understand some of those bigger, feelings. But you wanted to be, a writer. So you've lived your whole life with this one goal in mind. And I remember sitting down with you and saying, whatever you decide however you decide to write. And one of the big breakthroughs with you was Medium, by the way, was I remember saying to you, don't be afraid to ask yourself if the goal and the dream you had when you were a child is not the same thing now. Right. It might be the same thing, but it might look differently. Like you might not write in the genre you thought you did or whatever. And how you embrace creativity might be different.
Yeah, and that was a big shift for me. Yeah. I mean, I ended up writing over 400 pieces on Medium, which were nonfiction. You know, I think I posted one or two of my short stories on there briefly. I think I took them down pretty quickly, but most of it was about music. Anyone who knows me well at all knows that I drop things a lot while I'm doing podcasts, but that I'm a big music addict. I always have been, and I would write, album reviews, different kinds of music-related things, other kinds of pop culture things about TV, movies. But then I was doing poetry for a while.
Yeah.
And like I said, I published over 400 pieces on there, and I never would have thought that I would be doing that kind of thing. I joined Medium because I knew it was a place that you could go on and publish short stories and various things if you wanted, and I thought I was going to do that. So there was a turn that I didn't even know was there that I took, and it more than satisfied me for years. Kind of stepped away from that a little bit right now, but that's something that I am going to be revisiting to a degree, among other things that I have in mind. So yeah, you kind of gotta, I don't know, roll with the changes sometimes.
Yeah, and just know that there's, I don't know, infinite ways to embrace it and be okay with things changing and redefining who you are as a creative person. I mean, I've been inspired. I know many creative people who were writers, and I actually. I don't really want to use the past tense because maybe they're still writing. I don't know, but I know that there are friends of ours that have some have written and published who don't seem to be as integrated into that world anymore as far as the external view from my point of view.
Yeah.
But I see them doing new things. Like a friend of ours is now teaching herself embroidery. She cooks up crazy, delicious looking recipes all the time. Those are creative things. Another, friend of ours who was a writer when we all met each other, as far as I'm aware, is not really doing the writing thing, but has totally embraced this amazing sewing and creative kind of cosplay stuff and has an Etsy shop. The creativity is there. And so I think those are like some of the quiet and sometimes loud choices that we make out of courage to lean into, how we evolve as creative people. I know, my mother is a very creative person. She never wrote, but her creativity has evolved over the years as to what she makes and what she, does. And I think you just kind of have to, be okay with changing and realizing that maybe you might change back.
Yeah,
like I fully embrace that. I realize that 15 years from now, I could be like, oh, I have this story that I word vomit exactly like I did when I wrote, a 30-something girl, and, maybe it'll be a 60-something girl, and it just, word vomits out of me, and then I'm done again.
Right.
But, for me in this moment right now, this is my truth, and this is where I'm happy. I'm happy reading things and sharing other people's creative stuff. I'm happy writing little inspirational or informational blogs that hopefully someone amazing, someone might connect with. Yeah. Maybe writing a little short fiction here and there, writing a little poem every once in a while. And who knows, maybe one day maybe doing a little novella, if anything, at that. Smaller.
Right.
Less intrusive. I don't know. I think in some ways this is my character's fault, because I was writing a book about someone who thought the Grim Reaper was coming out after him. Yeah. He was retired.
Yeah, and much older character.
He was 67, retired, had what he thought was a successful career as an attorney, and all of a sudden he finds himself with nothing to do, no regrets, no hobbies, no one to come home to, a home that doesn't even look like a home. And he feels like all that he has left to look forward to is the end of his life. And so to write that, I had to put myself, I'm an empath, so I have to feel what people feel in order to describe it. So it's torturous for me. That's another reason why writing is a big deal for me, is when I'm writing a character that is going through stuff, I literally put myself into that emotional standpoint, kind of like some actors do, because then I can write from a point of, oh, this is how I feel in this moment. I feel the scene out, and then I write how it feels to me as best as I possibly can. And well, my character had a lot of regret. He didn't live. He worked too much. And I'm sitting here going, well, I've spent most of my life being in school or working. And now I would like to just sit down and enjoy life. I would like to randomly drive down to the beach and get beach fries and take a long walk and come back and not feel guilty about living my life. I'd like to learn how to crochet and I don't know, attempt to make pies again, because I haven't done that in a long time. So it's I don't know.
Yeah, you have to find happiness one way or another, and if what you're doing for whatever reason is holding you back, I think we said earlier that you've got to be willing to take some sort of pivot, whether it's a creative pivot or a pivot in a totally different kind of way.
And you kind of have to listen to yourself. Because, as a person who has been in bad relationships before, not this one, by the way, is part of the way to get out of those situations is you have to have the courage to say, something doesn't feel right here, right? I think the same can happen with any facet of our life, especially with creative people. Because we have this torturous kind of like emotional connection to making things, whatever the things are that you're making, whether it's music or whatever. And I think, you have to not be middle-aged and lose your train of thought when you're in the middle of a thing this is what happens. This is literally the digital version of me walking into a room and then going, oh, damn, what was I? And sometimes I'm like, oh, what I was going to say was really prolific and fantastic. But I was I looped myself around so that I'm all tied up. But,
pivots and,
you have to recognize when something isn't fitting. So for instance, like you with the story, that didn't feel right to you.
Yeah.
And you have to check yourself, like we said. This podcast, I hope, is inspiring to people who are feeling like making a big change, but are fearful of being honest and courageous to make those big changes, whether it's I'm taking a break from this or I'm doing this or XYZ, is to feel okay with making something that other people might view as not a good decision.
Yes.
Like, I know that probably behind my back, there are people who I have told about my random decisions who are like, oh, what a waste of money. She went and did this. And oh, well, pooey on you. It's not your decision. It's my life. Right. And for me, I know where I'm at. So this is hopefully going to inspire people to be okay with making the decisions that are absolutely, they know 100% good for them, but may not seem good when presented to other people. Mm-hmm. But I don't want it to be the thing that makes someone go, oh, well, she said to listen to myself, and I felt like I suck, so I can't do it. No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Not at all.
If the reason why you aren't going for something is because you are self-deprecating yourself, and you're saying, I don't have what it takes, I'm not good enough, that's not the reason to stop. Yeah. That's the reason, yes, to pivot and say, maybe I need to come at this from a different angle. And I know you and I have had this discussion, and I've said, when you're doing one thing, if it's not feeling right, hey, go write a poem.
Yeah.
If that doesn't feel right, go write a short story.
Yeah.
Hey, if that doesn't right, go write about an album that you just did. Sometimes distracting yourself from the thing that's inhibiting you from doing it will help you find the right angle to come at it. So while I want this to inspire people to be courageous to say no, I don't want people to say no for the wrong reasons.
No, I agree with you 100%. And it's very easy to do that.
Yes.
It's too easy to do that.
Yeah.
I know I have done that.
Yeah.
Where I'll be having a rough time with a writing session. I'll be like, okay, well, today's not a writing day.
Yeah.
And then I'll go watch 7 episodes of Criminal Minds, and be like, I just need a break. And, well, there's something to taking breaks when you need them. You have to realize, what you're doing and really question whether you should be doing that or you're not doing that. And
I think sometimes in those moments there is something that's trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sucks about being a human and a creative person, is that sometimes we don't always understand what the message is supposed to be. And so it's kind of like an experiment. We're all scientists in a way, trying to figure out what things are needed for this individual creature that exists, because we're all a little different. And I think this is why shows like this are really important, because it's not normalized enough some of the big pivotal, most important big jumps that you need to make to figure out who you are. I mean, I'm sure there are writers out there, for example, that went into what they did being like, I'm a romance writer. I'm writing romance, blah, 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 blah. And maybe they've got 10 books out and they're like, wow, God, I really kind of hate doing this. Yeah. I absolutely detest writing this. I actually want to write horror. And I'm pretty sure if that person has an editor or they'd be like, yeah, so that is not what your reader base is going to want to read. There is no connection between romance and these horribly graphic monsters that you want to do.
Right.
And so that external voice might try to convince that internal voice, no. But that's when that internal voice needs to be courageous to be like, no, actually, I was that person. I was that writer. But this is the writer that I am now. And I think we see that with some of the big publishers. We see, I mean, some of the big writers that we see, they kind of quietly pivot. And they're able to pivot once they have a big name.
Yes.
Because then they can say to the publisher, do you want a book with my name on it or what?
Yeah, well, in our other show, we had just done an episode of the Buddy and Lisa show. We talked about books we were reading, and one was Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. There was many years ago, before he was, the legendary Stephen King, where his first few books, he had to stick to mostly doing like horror-themed things. His first book was Carrie, and then he had The Shining. I think it was Salem's Lot. The Shining was around that time period. It was only a little later that he started doing different things. Sometimes he did it under a pen name.
Yeah.
His Richard Bachman name. And what we talked about in the last show was Mr. Mercedes. Now, that is very far removed from Carrie and from The Shining. And again, Buddy Gott and Lisa Gott are not Stephen King, and you are not Stephen King. But others do that kind of thing where they figure they want to try different things. You've seen that with someone like John Grisham. He's written any number of books now that are different than his legal thrillers. But you'll see sometimes, too, like newer writers, say, for example, Taylor Jenkins Reid, who has become one of the most famous authors of the past decade or so. Her first, I think, 2, maybe 3 novels were more like romantic stories about couples that were having trouble in their relationships, things like that. I have not read them yet, but from what I understand, they're very good. But then she shifted and started writing different kinds of books. What was the one, the Seven Husbands?
Oh, the Seven...
Evelyn Hugo?
The Seven Husbands of Evelyn...
Yeah, I didn't read it, but I knew you really liked it a lot.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah. Oh, that book is amazing, yes.
And then, of course, the only thing I've read by her so far, even though we own all of her books now, is Daisy Jones and the Six.
Yes.
So she's someone who, started one way.
Yeah.
I don't know what her reasons were for changing, but she decided she wanted to write different kinds of things. She did that. That worked really well for her.
And I think that's the power of the pivot.
Yeah.
Because we're human beings. I think to a certain extent, some of us lean into routines a little bit more than others do. I certainly have aspects of myself that are very routine or oriented. But then there are other times where I joke and I say, I kind of have commitment issues, except for when it comes to you. Like, I can't eat. Like, I have a coworker who literally eats the exact same thing every single day and has for like 30 years. And I'm like, oh God, God, can't you just, other than the flavor of her yogurt, she pretty much eats the same thing every day. And I'm like, oh, what a life. But it works for her. But for me, it doesn't. And I think human nature at large generally does. What's the saying? Variety is the spice of life, right?
Yeah.
And I think creative people are just hungry for creativity in all of its forms. And I would argue that most creative people are not creative in just one tiny little outlet. No. They are creative across the board. And I think that's why it's important to listen to the things that don't feel right and start a conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't make a knee-jerk reaction, but say, is it this story? Is it me? Am I trying to learn something? Interview yourself. Interview your muse and say, what are you trying to tell me right now? What do you want from me?
Exactly.
Like for me, the MFA decision, I thought it was my character saying, hey, you don't want to write the story like that. Which, to be honest, there was a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. I had a certain way of what I was doing and, way about going things. And I felt like I had gotten what I needed and I wanted to go my own way. But then after it, I realized, I I think that was only part of the question they were trying, or the message they were trying to get to me. And it's taken me weeks of asking myself, what is going on? Like, what am I trying to do? And when I had that breakthrough, I instantly had the gut reaction that I knew I was making the right decision because it felt right.
Yeah.
You feel it. You feel it. Like,
I felt it from you. I could tell that it was the right way for you to go.
Yeah. You just know. And so I think that's the, whatever the pivot is, it's embracing whatever that thing is, whether it's saying, I had enough of trying this story, and I'm not leaving it because I don't think, maybe ask yourself, am I leaving this because I don't think I can?
Yeah.
Or am I leaving it because I know I can, but I don't want to?
Yeah.
Because the latter is the correct thing.
And realize that your pivot's going to bring its own set of challenges with it. You know?
Absolutely.
You could be, like I said, working on a book about, this invisible man who has a half invisible chicken.
Disco.
Yeah, his name was Disco. That's the one aspect I might want to pull for something else maybe sometime. But, switching from that to more of a romance-oriented story about vampires or something. It's that will have its own set of challenges with it. I will come up with, I'm not saying that's my story, but you get where I'm going with this. I'll have to come up with, different plot points, different twists, things like that. And that is hard work. And you hit walls, whether it's that, whether you're a musician or an artist, you will hit those walls. But I'd say, and I think most people who have done this kind of thing for a while know that those are kind of fun most of the time, because you hit walls and you pull something together within yourself.
Oh, and when you break it down,
when you break down those walls, and
it feels amazing.
It feels really amazing. So be willing to pivot, whether it's through writing, music, maybe dip your toes into various things. I just said music. After many years of owning a guitar, Lisa bought me a guitar, I think 7 years ago, that for the most part's just been sitting in a corner. I've just recently started diving into lessons. I'm doing some online lessons, and I'm having a blast with it.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a guitar I had multiple guitars when I was a kid. I took lessons for a little while. I didn't really gel too well with the instructors I had, and that just didn't work out for me. Yeah. But now I'm having fun. And sometimes I will have a session where I'm practicing guitar for a half hour, and then I want to sit down and write for a half hour. Yeah. I think sometimes you get your creativity, gets lit, and that's great.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
It's just, and I don't know why so many people, I don't know, there's just a general consensus of poo-pooing that, that somehow, I also don't like the stereotype that all creative people are miserable, because I think that sets people on the wrong path too, is they think, well, it sucks to go through this. This is how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in the trenches. And while to a certain extent, being an adult at large, regardless of what you're doing, there are going to be trials and tribulations, even in the best of things that you're doing. Like, people who are parents and love their children. Yeah. I absolutely, even though I am not a parent with children, absolutely know that there are extremely difficult, trying times with that.
Sure.
And so you just kind of have to, but of course they don't instantly put their children up for adoption or leave them on the corner and say free kids for sale. At least I hope not. Sadly, there are probably people who do, but that's a whole different podcast. Yeah. But I think it's just, I think we need to normalize change.
Yeah. And being willing to accept that it's not usually a bad thing to go with a change.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Yeah. But sometimes what we want changes. Mm-hmm. There's a line that I love from an old TV sitcom. There was a show, I think you and I talked about this before. Mm-hmm. There was a famous show called Just Shoot Me that starred George Segal, David Spade, Wendy Malick, Laura San Giacomo. Great show, lasted for many years. But there was an episode of that in which one of the characters was struggling with something in their life, with one of their goals that they had had for many years. And I believe it was the main character who was the editor of the magazine on the show, Jack Gallo, played by George Segal, who'd said, that when he was very young, he had been traveling in Europe, and he saw up on a wall somebody in chalk had written, "Sometimes on your way to a dream, you get lost and find a better one.
Oh,
and he embraced that.
Yeah.
And he kind of took that to change where he was in his life. And this phrase was uttered multiple times throughout this episode, and it affected various characters in a positive way.
Oh, I love that.
And I love that too, and that stuck with me. That episode has to be at least 15, 20 years old.
I love that.
It's fiction. It's fiction, but it's true, I think. Sometimes on your way to what you think is your dream, you can get lost, get distracted, however you want to phrase it, and find a better dream that you can go for, or that fills your creative heart, your creative juices.
Because you don't know when you set out in life and writing a book or whatever, you don't know what that experience is going to mean to you or bring to you until you're in it. And I think that's where, like, you see it with younger people with college. They go into it with the best intentions that this is their degree. I unfortunately have seen it a lot with lawyers. There are people who went into it probably because their parents wanted them to go into it. Yeah. Probably because society says, get a law degree. Being a lawyer is a good, thing, which it is. It's probably one of the best degrees that you can get and flop with. Yeah. And I say flop in the most loving way, that you don't have to go to court. If you get a law degree and you come out and you realize, oh my God, why did I ever think being a lawyer would be a good choice of a job? There are a million other things that you can do with that. Yeah. I mean, there was a partner at my firm that literally was a partner for a little while and then left and moved to Africa. And started doing, tour guide stuff and everything. And she's living her best life. Yeah. That was absolutely not her goal. And and to be honest, she probably never envisioned that. But see, that's the pivot. She realized and took the courage, because that there are probably peers of hers that thought, oh, wow. I mean... Yeah.
What is she doing?
Yeah. Why is she doing? She having a midlife crisis?
Yeah.
Whatever.
She was so many years from becoming, one of the top partners.
I actually think that's the midlife crisis is actually a pivot. It is life forcing a pivot on you to almost gut check you. Yeah. Where are you at? Yeah. Are you meeting your current self with where it is? Yeah. Or are you trying to live a life that was meant for the 24-year-old you? Yeah. Because 45 or 65 or 85, might need different things. And you have to recognize with every leap and every courageous step that you take, it ain't going to be the last one. No. It's going to keep going until we take our last
exactly.
And I don't know what happens in the afterlife, but it's probably just a whole nother puzzling scenario of different steps that you have to learn.
And you never know. By embracing these pivots and taking steps that ultimately make you happier than you really maybe would have been otherwise, you could end up having a longer life. You see that a lot with people after they retire, where unfortunately some people will suffer because they were so attached to their jobs and they had really nothing else. And, they end up, some have health problems, maybe it shortens their lives. But you see other people who fully embrace, what they're doing next. Yeah. They take up a hobby they never had done while they were working and such. And during the other show, I mentioned reading Dick Van Dyke's book on, it's like tips on how to live to be 100. He just recently turned 100. That man still has things that keep him passionate. He's in his singing. He's in a barbershop quartet. He's 100 years old, He still does acting gigs, and there's any of you probably have examples like that in your own lives where people like that too, who find these things that they embrace and they're willing to make some changes. And
I think that's actually the power of getting older too. Yeah. You saying that made me think of one of my peers in one of my MFA classes. One of my peers was a 70-year-old doctor who was the chief of medicine at this huge hospital in Colorado, I think. Obviously, he's not looking to do this as his means. He's a doctor and in charge of a whole thing. but he was living and meeting a new truth for himself. As he said, I don't care. I know I'm 70 and it's stupid to go back to school and get a master's, another degree, but I want to go because I really want to write a book.
That's wonderful.
And he wanted, and I remember reading some of his stuff and I thought, oh God, you're good. Write that book.
Yeah.
Write that. So that was an example of the man who was pivoting. He was being courageous he was creative. Being a doctor is absolutely creative. He was a surgeon.
He probably caught some grief from people in his life, though. Even if they didn't say it out loud, some people were like, why is he bothering with that?
Yeah. Well, if you want to write a book, just write a book. Why are you going to school to do it? You know,
right.
We all hear those, and that's why separate the internal from the external. It's good. You know, it's just like Buddy and I are very fortunate to have each other to bounce story ideas and to bounce
to have conversations like this off the air. I mean,
and to bounce all of those things off. But as I always say to him, I'm happy to always offer you my 2 cents on things. But you decide what you do with it. And I think we all have to remember that, is that ultimately we decide whether we take someone's advice, mush it around and kind of make let it inspire us to find our own truth. Maybe I tell people all the time, you could take what I say and put it in the trash can because it might not be helpful at all. Yeah. I think sharing is caring. You know, that's what the little Care Bears said. And I stand by that, you know.
And it's hard, you know. You might, come to some sort of decision where you don't know if it's the right move. And actually, that happens to all of us just about every day.
Yeah.
But
you got to sit on it and meditate on it and mull it over
and you can, you
do the best.
You could do your best. Try it one way. If that doesn't work, try it another way. Somehow find your happiness. Yeah. No, easier said than done, but it's there.
It's true.
You know, if you embrace the things that you have a passion for, chances are you're going to find some happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
So, boy, I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, it was really great. It's so funny, though, because I am so becoming like a 187-year-old person, because there has been something that I've been wanting to say, a line or a little tidbit of information for the last, 157 minutes that we've been talking. And I couldn't tell. I know what's going to happen. I know exactly what's going to happen is we're going to end this episode. And afterwards, I'm going to be like brushing my teeth or something tonight and be like, aha! That's what it was.
Yeah, definitely.
So whatever. There was probably some other meaty little nugget of goodness I was going to offer there, but it was more or less the same of what we were kind of talking about how. Oh, that's what it was. Oh my God, I got it back. Don't lose it, Lisa. Is that everybody's process is also really different. Okay, so don't let that be the wrong deciding factor. Like, I'm going to use you and me as an example. You were talking about, your kind of struggles with finding the right path for your story over your years. And you obviously have a much longer trajectory into that world than I do. And I see so much people with that who say, see, that's the sign that I'm not meant to do that. No, absolutely not. Some people... And I think you would probably know these things more than I would, but there are probably a gazillion writers, musicians, whatever, who have struggled either with rejection or finding the right song, right story, right painting, to fling out into the world before they hit it and they find who they are, their own individual creative voice. Right. Some people, it takes a lifetime for that to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes the people that it takes a lifetime for, they look at the people who seemingly it just seems to right out of them, just fluff right out of them with no effort whatsoever. I don't think anyone's ever said fluff out of them, but I'm very bad at sayings. So, just because it seems easier, that person who seems like they have it easier, there's probably some other aspect of the process that is equally harder for them. So we all have our things. So don't let the fact that you've been struggling trying to find that thing, it just means that, you're still in it. And try to make that journey when you're trying to find that levity that I'm talking about, that feeling of, oh God, I feel that breakthrough. I just had a breakthrough. Like, I am who I need to be in this moment. If you haven't gotten there yet, it just means that you've got a little bit more of the pieces of the puzzle to figure out. So make it a fun journey. Have fun doing it. Write a whole bunch of buddy, sit down and write a whole bunch of different things and see what makes you feel something in a different way. The same is for everyone. I don't know, for those of you who write fiction who suddenly feel bored, sit down and write some nonfiction.
Yeah. And this could be a topic, and actually it should be a topic for an entirely different show, but kind of know what your goals are to a degree. Like, for example, if you're writing a novel, you maybe shouldn't go into it thinking, I am writing a book and I'm not going to be happy unless this is a top 20 bestseller. There's things that, are going to be out of your control with things.
Yes.
But like I said, that's for an entirely different show.
Yes.
But I think it does play at least a little bit into what we're saying here. Like, for me, I know one of my goals is, like for the next story that I write, it's just a matter of, I want to write, I have an idea of what I'm going to write next. It's going to be a short story. For me, I have, at this point, no goal in terms of like trying to get it published or anything like that. For right now,
you just want to write something.
I just want to write something.
Yeah.
So maybe be willing to change your goals as you go too. Change the end game.
Barter with yourself.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. So, anything else we need to talk about with this one?
Oh boy, I think we got it.
Yeah, I think we did. So. I'm so glad you got to where you needed to be
good.
with the thing you rolled on to.
I have been living a life of questionable decisions, and boy, some of them have not panned out well. But that's part of the process too, is you have to learn it, and I think that's the gut check there is when you're making you got to listen, and most of the time what has served me wrong was not being true to myself. And I think that's where the courage comes into place, is you've got to be brave enough to be true to yourself.
I love that. That's great. Be brave enough to be true to yourself. That's wonderful.
It's a good way to end.
That is a good way to end. And another good way to end would be to say thank you.
Yes.
For being a part of the Pop and Prose. I was going to say the Buddy and Lisa show, but this is the Pop and Prose podcast. Also, look for the Buddy and Lisa show. Found in all your fun, beloved podcasting places.
I was about to say all your fun podcast stores, but as I already told you, I'm not very good at saying. So,
and if you want to look for us anywhere online, well, Lisa, you mentioned Substack earlier.
Yeah, I'm on Substack, Instagram, Threads, Bluesky, all Lisa M. Gott Writes. So just type in Lisa M. Gott Writes on any of those places, and I'm there.
There you go. And I'm on Substack, but I haven't done a lot there lately. I intend to do more.
Boo!
I know. I'm on Medium.com.
Yay!
I have made my stuff on Medium all free. Medium is a place where a lot of things are behind a paywall. Like if you were to find one of my articles or stories on Medium right now, a little pop-up will come up asking you if you want to subscribe. You can subscribe for free if you want to follow me on there. It might be a little hard to find that button to click on, but you can subscribe and read all of my things for free. There's over 400 pieces there. There's going to be more coming, and
and my Substack is a life in revision.
I love that.
So it's really got, right now there's not too much. There's a poem and a couple posts about where I'm at, but I plan to keep having posts when they come to me, poetry, some short fiction, all that, and just general discussion about books, creativity, and kind of life. Both on the page and off the page. I love that.
So. You're also on Bluesky?
Yes. And Substack is free, of course. Yes. I have no, dear God, I'm not going to have you pay me to have anything that I'm spewing at you.
A lot of things, of course, that's one of the beautiful things about Substack. You can kind of set it up, to have things behind a paywall or not. I am very, very active on Bluesky.
Yes.
I know that has certain political leanings. I am not there for politics at all. If you...
music.
Yeah, I'm there. I do a lot of music challenges there. I post a lot about music there. Music that I love and have loved throughout my life, and new music that I'm falling in love with. So, if you are that kind of person, you might want to follow me there. And that's it for my plugging myself.
Well, and that's also a kind of a perfect loop back to what we were talking about, which is that right there is a perfect example of being creative. is you kind of lean into creating these fun challenges that have
I love it.
metrics, or participating in challenges that have these set metrics. And
I've been on there pretty active for close to a year. I think it was like last spring, last summer, early last summer. I've made so many new friends from all around the world on there, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's another deal of you find passion in a place you never would have thought of.
Yeah.
So
and we need more of that in life.
We do need more of that in life. So thank you again for tuning in. Lisa, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Everybody, have a great day.
We'll see you later. Brave.
Be brave. Be yourself.
Bye.
Bye.